It feels like there's been a major power shift at Arsenal. Is Andrea Berta far more powerful than Edu ever was? Why do I say that? And what does it mean for the club? We'll get into that and more on today's episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's do it. Hey people, how are we doing? Welcome back to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Happy Tuesday. Yeah, sun is shining, feeling good. Really glad that we got second place wrapped up. Not celebrating it before people get on my back, but glad that we were able to just kind of draw a line under that pretty much. Obviously, it's still mathematically possible for Manchester City to overtake us, but I don't think that's going to be happening. So I think we can chill and we can be quite confident in that fact. Also, we got Champions League football secured, which is important as well. Felt like it was going to be a given at the start of the season. It should have been a given, but obviously fast forward to where we are now, and we've had to do it on the penultimate weekend of the season, right? So important that we got that stuff done. Important that we sort of wrapped those bits up so that we can now start looking ahead. And we've got that game against Southampton, of course, at the weekend, and obviously we want to win it. Obviously we want to finish the season with as many points as we possibly can. The more wins you get on the board, the more positive the mood is. But we all recognize and we all understand that there is loads and loads and loads for us to do over the course of the summer in order to get this team to where we want it to be. Now, football is always moving. Football is a very cyclical sport. And what we have is a situation whereby things that looked really good 2 years ago maybe don't look quite what we need right now. So, for example, in the midfield, you looked at it and you went Thomas Partey, brilliant, and Jorginho as a backup, fantastic. And now Jorginho's going and Thomas Partey is engaged in some contract talks with Arsenal, but we haven't reached a conclusion of that yet. We'll get into that a little bit later on in the pod. But we need regeneration, refreshment. We need renewal. We need to go again. And so there are things that we need to improve. We had a forward line that 2-3 seasons ago looked really good. It looked like Martinelli was on this incredible trajectory, that Leandro Trossard was almost the perfect in and out player, someone that could come off the bench and could impact things and could help us. And fast forward to today and we're looking at certain areas of that attack and we're thinking, can we upgrade? Can we do better? So football is about renewal. It's about constantly changing and moving with the times. And for that reason, I think we've reached a point where we need to do a fair bit of work again this summer. And we're all hoping that work gets done nice and early so we can get a picture and an understanding of what we're going to look like next season. And we can try and gauge from that, how likely we are to achieve our goals. It's going to be a really, really interesting summer. You Crute, I don't know how to say that, says, are you going to waffle all summer long? I am, mate. So if you don't like it, then unsubscribe if you're even subscribed and don't watch it. It's not compulsory. I'm not throwing it down your throats. If you're here, it's because you choose to be here. And I appreciate everybody that does. But if you don't like the content, if you don't like what I'm going to say, then there's not really much else I've got to say to you other than do something else. If it's that bad, surely you got better things to do. Anyway, we got a fair few stories to work our way through today. We're going to talk Andrea Berta, Mikel Arteta. I think there's a really interesting conversation to be had here, so we're going to do that. We're also going to talk about the news regarding Jurrien Timber. We'll discuss Max Dowman, Thomas Partey's contract talks. We'll talk very briefly around Matheus Cunha, Viktor Gyökeres, and we'll take some of your questions and thoughts, as always, from the live chat box. Okay, without further ado, then, let's get into our first story. We're going to talk Jurrien Timber. Yep, another Arsenal player has to go under the knife. Another surgery required. Jurrien Timber is going to have a procedure carried out on an ankle injury that he's got at the moment. That was reported yesterday by Sam Dean, and Arsenal have taken the decision to sort of act in order to try and rectify a problem that clearly Jurrien Timber's been suffering with for a while. We know that the preference normally isn't to do surgery. So if you get to this point, it's normally because the medical professionals around you and those in charge feel the kind of need to do that. And they think that in the long run, it will improve the situation, generally speaking. And we've had some real rotten luck with Jurrien Timber and injuries. He first did his ACL really, really quickly, missed an entire season pretty much. And now, after having a full season where at times he's been in and out of the team and he's carried some problems, but he's now got to undergo some surgery. Now, from what people are reporting, from what I'm reading, it doesn't look like this is anything major. It looks like he will still be ready for preseason. But what it does do for Jurrien Timber is just kind of take away some of his break. And if there's, a player that needs a break, probably more than most, having returned to the team after an ACL injury, having played so many games, having really given it his absolute everything, it's probably Jurrien Timber. He's probably the one that you look at and go, man, if anyone needs it, it's him. So it's really, really unfortunate that he finds himself in this situation. But we talk a lot, don't we, as Arsenal fans, and we certainly have done in the last few months, about load management. And while I would agree that that's something that Arsenal and Mikel Arteta need to manage better, that's definitely something that needs to be managed better. I think what you've seen here with Jurrien Timber is the consequence of other injuries and the consequence of injuries within the squad and the strain that they then put on some of your other players. Now, I'm not just talking about Ben White. Obviously, Ben White missed a significant chunk of the season, which meant that even when he was probably 70, 75% fit, we were having to use Jurrien Timber. We were having to manage him in such a way where we could, push him through these games and get him on the pitch and available to help us because we were desperate. And it's not just because of Ben White's injury. Takahiro Tomiyasu would have been a right back option as well, but he's been nowhere to be seen all season. And again, it's not the guy's fault. And, I'm not seeking to have a go at him. But if you've got players like that in your squad, you have to really seriously reconsider whether they can take you forward. I'm not talking about Ben White in this instance. It's the first time, really, isn't it, that Ben White's had a problem that's kept him out for any sustained period of time. But the Tomiyasu situation, Arsenal need to think long and hard about whether they move forward with him, because he just isn't available anywhere near enough. And so the combination of those two being injured, both White and Tomiyasu, it meant that there was greater strain put on Jurrien Timber. And then we come back full circle around to that point about load management. And we go, well, maybe Mikel who could he have played at right back? Like he even used Thomas Partey there at times out of desperation. That's how bad the situation was there. But then you miss Thomas Partey from the midfield and you have a problem there, don't you? Because it changes the dynamic and the balance. And maybe you have to bring Rice back into the six, which I think we can all agree now isn't where he's, at his best for Arsenal Football Club. So, yeah, we go around in circles, but ultimately injuries that have sort of gripped our squad and have wreaked havoc through our squad have meant that we've had to put greater loads on players that probably couldn't handle them, that probably didn't need them. And that then has a knock-on effect. So, again, the load management point is valid. We got to look at that as a football club, I think, and we got to do that better. But at the same time, it just highlights the kind of real damage that these injuries have done to us this season. It's not just about missing X player for X game. It's not as simple as that. When you lose a player, that means you then have to turn to someone else. That means you put greater pressure on that somebody else. You have a greater reliance on that somebody else, and that can lead to problems for them. So it's been a rotten season in that sense, and thank God it's nearly over. Let's hope that Jurrien Timber can undergo this procedure and can be back ready for pre-season, because I tell you what, he is up there with a shout for Arsenal's player of the season. I really do believe that. I think he's been that good. I think if you're sort of working your way through the list of candidates, you probably put Big Gabby in there prior to the injury. I thought he was sensational. David Raya's probably in with a shout, although recently I think people would argue that he's made a few errors, but he would be up there. For me, Jurrien Timber's a really, really strong contender. Declan Rice will be in there as well, but he didn't have a great first half of the season, I didn't think. Timber is the one that we've all kind of been taken aback by, that we've all been looking at and gone, bloody hell, what a player we signed here. So wish him all the best. Wish him a speedy recovery. Fingers crossed we can have him back for the preseason and he can be ready to go in the new campaign. It's a shame that it cuts into his break, that he's going to be having to do a bit of work to recover and all the rest of it from this surgery that he's going to undergo. But if it solves a problem that is there, that is lingering, then it's the right thing to do. So, look, wish him all the best. And hopefully we have him ready to go for the new campaign, because he has been, as I say, if not Arsenal's player of the season, certainly one of the top three in my opinion. Arsenal youngster Max Dowman is likely to be part of the pre-season tour, and it's understood, according to John Cross, that he's been told he'll be part of the first team squad next season. Now, I've seen a bit of Max Dowman, not just on the video clips, but in the flesh, and he is as good as people tell you he is. Certainly at this level, anyway, 18s. He's ripping it up. He really, really is. He's an incredible carrier of the ball. He's got a really good left foot, brilliant dribbler, great balance, dips in and out, twists and turns, and really direct in the way that he carries the ball towards the opposition penalty area. And more often than not, and you can see that in his sort of goal numbers and assist numbers, he does damage in the opposition box. So he's on a great trajectory. It's right that Arsenal give him something, I think, that just shows him that, we as a club really do believe in him and that there's a pathway here for him, I beg your pardon. But at the same time, you've got to manage these players really, really carefully. You look at young Ethan Nwaneri, made his debut at 15 years old, broke into the first team squad this season. And towards the back end of the campaign, we're all kind of scratching our heads now as to why he's not playing more than he has. Is he carrying something? Is there a bit of an injury? Don't know. That's what some people are speculating. But, progress is not always kind of linear, right? That you do sometimes have ups and you have spikes and you also have downs, and sometimes you'll flatline a little bit as well. And I think that's my kind of warning to people about Max Dowman. As talented as he is, as good as he is, he's very, 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 very young, and you got to manage your kind of expectations of him. And I think the club have a duty and a responsibility to protect him from the kind of overhype that will come. You can't stop it, but you can manage it, I think. And that's where the club need to kind of step up for me. And I'm sure they will. They've done it with other players. There's no reason to believe that they can't manage it with Max Dowman. If I had one concern about Max Dowman jumping up into the first team, it's nothing to do with technical ability. It's to do with maybe physicality. He's still growing. He's still very, very young. And I think he needs to bulk up a little bit, because I think just watching him when I did, I thought it was a fantastic dribbler, but I thought the opposition, even at that level, were clearly keen to kick him, were clearly keen to chop him. They felt that he was a level above and that was the only way to stop him. And as a result of that, they were quite rough with him. And I think more senior pros, those players that are just a little bit more long in the tooth, a little bit more wily, if you like, they're going to do exactly the same thing. And there's a bit of a pride thing as well that kicks in here when you're a footballer as well, right? So if you're a 32, 33-year-old midfielder, right, and this 15, 16-year-old comes onto the pitch and literally takes you to the cleaners, which Max Dowman, by the way, certainly has the talent to do, you're going to get pride hurt. You're going to kick, you're going to pull, you're going to foul, you're going to leave them in on him. You're going to be overly physical to prevent yourself from essentially being embarrassed. I think that's the kind of competitive nature of footballers, and it does spill into crap like that at times. And so I think that's something that, we got to protect him from. And that's why I look at him and I think great player, undoubtedly incredibly talented. Physically, he's got some growing to do. And that's not a slight on him or a criticism of him. The guy's a kid still, right? I think about the size I was when I was that age versus now. I can hold my own now. I probably couldn't then. So it's not to have a go at him, but it is something that I think we'll have to keep an eye on, and that'll play a part, I think, in how much exposure he gets out on the field of play when he does make that jump up to the first team. And not been told that he's definitely going to be on the preseason tour, but the feeling around the place is that it would be very, very unlikely for him to be left off of that list of players that will be traveling over to the Far East for that preseason tour. So yeah, let's see how it goes. Okay, on to the next one. We're going to talk Thomas Partey. Arsenal midfielder Thomas Partey is almost out of contract, but according to reports, those contract talks that we heard about just a couple of weeks ago are progressing. There's no breakthrough yet as far as we understand it, but Arsenal exploring the possibility of keeping Thomas Partey. Not sure what the terms would look like. Would it be 1 season? Would it be 2? Would it be a 1 year with a 1 year option? Not entirely sure. Don't know what the salary would look like. Don't know if he'll get the pay bump that I'm sure his people will be after. But I think for me, Thomas Partey did enough this season to show that he still has a lot of value to this group and to this squad. And I'm not surprised that Arsenal, are exploring this possibility. We hear that Thomas Partey is also keen on staying, which is good. It's a help. But at the same time, if a mega offer comes in from overseas, the kind of offer that we just can't get near, A, financially, but B, in terms of the contract length, then I wouldn't be surprised if he was to accept something like that as well. So this one is very much open for me. Let's see what happens. Let's see what transpires. I think I've talked a lot about renewal at the start of this podcast, and I've talked a lot about regeneration, and I certainly feel like we've got to do that in the midfield. We're bringing Martin Zubimendi in by all accounts. That's what everybody tells us. That's what it feels like is happening with the Spaniard. So he's replacing Jorginho, if you like. Bringing him in and having Thomas Partey for him to work alongside, I think is a good thing. Because as much as I think Zubimendi's talented, I do worry about certain aspects of his game. And there is naturally going to be an adaptation period. There always is. So having someone as experienced and as competent as Thomas Partey to essentially share the role with at the start, I think it could be really beneficial to Martin Zubimendi. But it's also beneficial to the club as well, because it means that you can focus on getting priority targets, right? You get Martin Zubimendi in this summer. Next summer, if you keep Thomas Partey, you look for that additional midfield player. And, it gives you time to kind of scour the market, figure out what you want to do. Perhaps someone new emerges. You're essentially not investing a mega amount of money into a second midfielder that maybe you're not sure about, because you've got Thomas Partey there. And that should give you comfort as a football club. And you can do that renewal and regeneration just that little bit slower. Slow and steady wins the race, as people say. So, yeah, let's see what happens with that one. Will he stay? Will he go? We don't know for sure yet, but it looks like he wants to stay. It looks like the club are keen on keeping him. It's just whether terms can be agreed. And, of course, we'll keep you up to speed with what happens with regards to his future over the course of the summer. Right, really, 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 really brief pause. And when we come back, we're going to talk Matheus Cunha, Viktor Gyökeres, and the power shift that I think is taking place at Arsenal. Just a theory, but an interesting one. Hear me out. We'll be back in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
You heard the man. Like and subscribe. You are listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Don't forget to leave a like on the video if you haven't done so already. If you're with us on YouTube, likes are the golden currency. So, if you haven't done so already, please do leave us a like. It really, really does help. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already as well. We're not a million miles away from that target that we desperately want to get to, the 40K mark here on YouTube. And if you're listening to us on Apple or on Spotify, you can leave us a review. All of that stuff really, really does help. In terms of likes, we're nowhere near where we want to be. We've got over 400 of you with us live right now, and we got 48 likes on the board. That means only 10% of you have bothered to hit the like button. It's free. It doesn't cost a thing, but it really, really helps me. So if you wouldn't mind leaving a like on the video, I'd very, very, very much appreciate it. Also, if you want to go one further and support the pod by becoming a patron, you can do so. Patreon.com/the Chronicles of a Gooner. The link is in the description below. There was some player ratings that we put out yesterday post the Newcastle game that are exclusive to patrons. But also, you get to listen to every single episode over on Patreon ad-free. And I know that's a big deal for a lot of people. I know when you listen on Apple or Spotify, you get ads, right? You get ads baked in. When you watch on YouTube, you definitely get ads. And all of that is essential to the pod to keep it going and all the rest of it. But if you are a patron, you'll be able to access every single episode in audio format ad-free. So if that appeals to you, that's another reason to sign up as a patron on the Chronicles of a Gooner. Right, let's talk Matheus Cunha. Okay, so player that we were quite significantly linked with if you go back to January, but I felt like at the time everybody knew how desperate we were for a striker. Perhaps looking back on it now with hindsight, people were adding up 2 + 2 and sometimes getting to 6 or 7. And that was probably the case when it comes to Matheus Cunha. Do I believe that Arsenal explored the possibility of signing him? Probably. I think that's likely. But do I think that Arsenal were as keen as maybe was reported at the time? Probably not. Otherwise, I think we would have maybe carried that interest on into the summer. And I can't see why anybody would join Manchester United right now over Arsenal Football Club. I know people will say it's still Manchester United, the great Manchester United. They've still got a pull. Ruben Amorim's a good coach. People quite like him, although the results haven't really shown that just yet. And obviously, Manchester United financially are probably going to pay a very, very competitive salary for the player. All of that stuff, it makes sense, right? All of that stuff makes sense. But from a purely footballing perspective, there's no reason on God's green earth that you would choose Manchester United over Arsenal right now. Manchester United has been a graveyard for forwards for such a long time. I remember, right, sitting back on my sofa at home, feet up, sipping on a Peroni, watching the Serie A and looking at Rasmus Højlund and thinking, he can go somewhere, you know. He joins Man United. He's become a bit of a laughing stock, as sad as I am to say that. And then I looked at Joshua Zirkzee and I thought, what a really clever footballer this guy is. Does he score enough goals to be regarded as an elite centre forward? Probably not. But when you look at what he brings to the table in terms of the way he links up with people, in terms of the way he combines with people, he's a real talent. Comes to Man United and, you know, completely falls away and fades away. So I don't know why, from a footballing perspective, I would want to go to Manchester United if I'm Matheus Cunha. I know Sir Jim Ratcliffe was on camera sort of really highlighting the financial issues that United are experiencing at the moment. I think it was in part to justify some of the silly decisions he's made. But Man United, in my opinion, can still pay a very competitive salary. And I suppose for Matheus Cunha, the opportunity to go there and be the main man is probably a big appeal and a big thing. Portuguese coach as well, who will speak Cunha's language, and maybe that helps as well. Maybe that communication is really important to him. I don't know. But look, we're not signing Matheus Cunha by the looks of it. It looks like he's heading for Manchester United. And I know it's a name that some Arsenal fans have still been kind of discussing over the last couple of weeks. I think it became quite clear after the January window ended that at least our interest, however strong it felt like that was going to disappear come the summer, and it certainly feels that that's the case. Fabrizio Romano has put the exclusive out, and he says, well, I think he was the first one to report it. Now he says Man United are set to approach Wolves to proceed with the £62.5 million release clause, and they want to pay that in installments. The deal is almost done on the players' side, as revealed yesterday, with the final details being clarified. Cunha has said yes to Manchester United. £62.5 million feels a lot. It does. Man United are going to want to try and spread that over the course of the season. But if you look at Cunha's return this season, I think it's pretty good. Let me just bring it up in front of me. Hold on. Just to make sure that I'm not fluffing the numbers in any way, shape or form. But I'm just doing a quick search on him. Bear with me a second. I don't know why my phone's working so slowly. Matheus Cunha, Brazilian centre forward, 25 years old, will be 26 actually in a few days' time. 15 league goals, 6 assists. So that's 21 direct goal contributions in 31 games. It's pretty good. Pretty good. Listen, I like Cunha. I like the way he takes shots. I like his kind of shoot on sight policy. I think that's something that maybe we're missing a little bit. We did talk at the time, when we go back to January, about how I don't really know where he fits into our structure. And so it made it feel to me like not quite the perfect fit. However, do we need to break out of that structure a little bit? Do we need to be less rigid in terms of our structure in order for our attacking players to really thrive? That's a question that I've been asking myself all season. And so I'm not against bringing someone in that just slightly breaks or changes the mold. Let's see how it goes. Let's see what we do. But in terms of Matheus Cunha, that looks like it's a no-go for Arsenal. He's on his way to Manchester United. He's a good addition to them. I don't know that I would have paid 62.5 million for him. But hey, if that's the only price at which Wolves are willing to do business, then you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place if you're United. They clearly need a striker. They need someone that can put the ball in the back of the net. They need someone that's going to raise their level in that final third. And he certainly does that. Time now to talk Viktor Gyökeres. And what are we discussing when it comes to the big man? Well, a couple of things, right? So first of all, he put a post up displaying his incredible physique. And it was liked by Declan Rice. Now, I mean, I don't tend to read too much into these types of things, but I know a lot of people out there do. So I thought it was worth a mention. Is Viktor Gyökeres coming to Arsenal this summer? Well, if he is, it's not because Declan Rice liked his post. I can tell you that. But does Declan Rice know something we don't? That's the kind of theory going around. Look, I don't read into that too much. They might have just had a chat after the game where we played Sporting, and they might have just followed each other on social media, and that's the extent to which it goes. Who knows? But the reason I bring up Gyökeres today is not because Declan Rice liked his Instagram post, as much as people would love to make a massive deal out of that. It's because, again, Manchester United are being linked. Now, I would question whether Manchester United are able to buy Matheus Cunha and Viktor Gyökeres. And so the Gyökeres story that did the rounds yesterday, I think loses a bit of credibility, or loses a little bit in terms of how likely it is to develop, because this thing with Cunha is moving forward. I don't think they can afford both. I think they could do with both. I think they need both. I think you could argue that we need both as well. But I don't see Man United doing both of those deals. I think the reason people have been talking about Gyökeres to Manchester United is because, again, a bit like when we were talking about Cunha, they will be competitive financially. They will offer him a starring role. And, of course, he's got that existing relationship with Ruben Amorim, having worked with him very, very successfully at Sporting. But I don't think we need to worry. I think when it comes to Gyökeres, Cunha, and any other centre forward that we're interested in, I beg your pardon, we don't need to worry about the likes of Man United. We might need to worry about the likes of Liverpool when it comes to other players, or maybe Manchester City. We don't need to worry about Man United right now. So I just wanted to make that point on Gyökeres, because I read a lot of posts on X yesterday from people that were seemingly losing their minds, essentially, about the fact that Gyökeres had even been linked to Man United. I mean, people get linked all the time. You know, I read a link between us and Eberechi Eze earlier today, and I'd love it to happen because I think he's a really good player, and I'd love us to bring in a striker and Ebere Eze. But I'm not going to lose my mind over something that I don't know to be true, or to have that much about it right at this stage in time. So, yeah, no need to lose our heads. I don't think we have to worry about Viktor Gyökeres going to Manchester United, especially if they're signing Matheus Cunha, which it looks like is happening. Right, we're going to take another really, 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 really brief pause. And when we come back, we are going to get into our main topic today, which is what I believe to be a slight power shift at the top of Arsenal Football Club. What does this mean for us going into the summer? Am I talking complete and utter nonsense? Feel free to tell me in the live chat. But before we do that, like the video, Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And if you're listening to us on audio, please do leave us a review. Remember, you can get all these episodes completely ad-free over on the Patreon page, patreon.com/the Chronicles of a Gooner, and you get exclusive content. Sign up now if you're interested. If not, don't worry about it. It's not compulsory, but I would love your support, especially through the summer, where a lot of work does drop off. I have to be open and honest about that. And I'll see you all in just a second. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Welcome back to the pod. Right. Are you going to hear me out? I think you're going to hear me out. Okay. So I'm talking about power shifts. I'm talking about a change in the dynamics at the top of Arsenal Football Club. And I've been thinking about this for a couple of reasons. So the first reason that this kind of really propped up in my mind as a thought was back when Andrea Berta was appointed. I looked at him and I thought, this guy's the best in class. This guy has been there, done it. This guy isn't coming in as someone learning on the job. Edu, as good as he did and as well as he did and as big a role as he played, in my opinion, in turning the club around and putting it sort of back in the right direction or facing in the right direction, I think he was learning on the job. Arteta was learning on the job, and they kind of developed a really good relationship and strong bond as a result of them both being in a really similar position. They've got these roles of huge and great responsibility, and they want to do the best that they can, but they're kind of, hypothetically holding hands, if you like, as they walk down this road together, and they're trying to find their way through a load of challenges and a load of issues that they were always going to be faced with. Andrea Berta isn't that. He's been there, done it. He knows the game. He knows the score. He's coming in for results now. And while I was upset with the way the January window went, and I was upset at the time that Arsenal didn't appoint someone quickly, and I felt at the time that maybe had an impact on our lack of business in the January window, actually, with hindsight, I'm glad that they waited and appointed the right guy and someone with that track record rather than bringing in someone who, again, was going to be learning on the job and who might not have that sort of cutting edge and killer instinct and experience, essentially, that we need to get this team over the line. And we talk a lot about getting the team over the line, and a lot of that will be pinned on Mikel Arteta, and it will be seen as his responsibility, given he's the manager of the football club. But getting over the line can be aided just as much by the transfer business that you do. The better players you have, the more likely you are to get over the line. So the whole club has a responsibility to steer us over the line, not just Mikel Arteta. And I feel like Andrea Berta could really be the guy to do that. I'm hopeful more than anything else because, I don't know what he's going to manage at Arsenal. And obviously, he's going to be working within the parameters set by the ownership. But I'm really, really confident that this is a good appointment. But I think I knew that the dynamic would change when he came in a little bit. I think listening to some of Mikel Arteta's language has sort of reinforced that idea in my mind. And then reading Josh Kroenke's program notes at the weekend, that has also kind of really, strengthened that idea in my mind. So let me explain a little bit about what I mean here. I don't think that Berta has come in to share responsibilities with Mikel Arteta. I don't think he's come in to let Mikel Arteta call the shots. He's not come in to be Mikel Arteta's facilitator, which you could argue at times Edu might have been. And then we got to a point where Edu clearly had ambition and wanted to move on and was made a counter offer by Arsenal, as far as I understand it, but decided to go elsewhere. Maybe in part, and again, I'm speculating here. This is purely speculation. I don't know this for fact. But you'd imagine that part of that was because he felt like he was facilitating Mikel Arteta's growth more than actually working on his own, perhaps. Just a theory. Andrea Berta's not coming to do that. He's coming to win. He's come in to get us on the right path. He's come in to give us that bit of X factor and that bit extra that we simply didn't have before his arrival. It feels like he has taken control. It feels like he's grabbed the thing by the throat. And yes, he'll listen to Mikel Arteta. And yes, he'll work in connection with Mikel Arteta and in tandem with Mikel Arteta. It's really, really important that sporting directors and managers work collaboratively. It's really important. But collaboratively is one thing. Having the manager call the shots is another. And the reason I say this is because if you listen to Mikel Arteta's language and Josh Kroenke's language over the last few days, I think it's quite telling. And people will say, well, maybe they didn't mean it like that and you're just overanalyzing it, blah, 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 blah. Maybe I am. But I think there is a power shift. I think that there will still be an element of collaboration. I'm not saying that that goes away, but I think Andrea Berta will be a lot more imposing in terms of what he wants to do than maybe Edu was. And I think his track record gives him the ability to do that. It gives him the credit in the bank. It allows him to be able to kind of hold up examples of successes to Mikel Arteta to say, Mikel, you're a great manager. You're moving in the right direction. You're learning on the job. You're doing fantastically well. You've got this club into a much better position than it was when you found it, when you took it over. But I know better, lad. I know better. Sometimes I know better. I don't feel like Edu could really do that to Arteta. I'm not saying I want someone to take all control away from Mikel Arteta and put it all on themselves. I'm not saying that. But what I do want is someone with greater expertise, with greater experience, to be able to support him, also to be able to take things out of his hands when you don't feel he's capable. Or maybe capable is the wrong word, but when you don't feel, he's the right guy to make that call or call those shots. Post Newcastle on Sunday, Mikel Arteta said, we're going to enjoy the season. Sorry, we're going to enjoy the summer. We're going to go to the beach and we're going to have a good time. The ones upstairs will do what they have to do. If ever there was a moment where Mikel Arteta passed the buck at Arsenal, that was it. He doesn't often say things like that. He doesn't often say things like, the ones upstairs will do what they have to do. It's always we. It's always us as a club. We're working together. We're collaborating. We're going to work with the ownership, etc., etc. Connection, togetherness. He's always championing those ideas and those things. For him to say the ones upstairs will do what they have to do, it's for me, Mikel Arteta passing the buck a little bit. And that's fine. It's healthy. Not one man should have all the responsibility in the world. So I don't mind that. But I think you've seen signs of this. You've seen signs of sort of Mikel Arteta doing this and making these types of points. If you go all the way back to January, you heard him say, yeah, of course I want a striker, but it's what we can do. Again, it was a less direct way, I think, of putting the responsibility and pinning it on the hierarchy. But you did get the first sign of not a crack in the relationship, but you got the first sign of, Mikel wanting to kind of defend himself a little bit and not willing to accept the blame or the responsibility or all the heat from a lack of business that he clearly felt was, based on the wants and the needs of the people upstairs. So he talks about going off, enjoying the beach, having a good time, blah, blah, blah. But the key line from what he said post Newcastle was, the ones upstairs will do what they have to do. That says a lot. And then you look at Josh Kroenke's program notes. He says, we plan to invest to get behind winning and doing better next season. Our sporting director, Andrea, will play an important role in this. We're crystal clear on exactly what we need to do and the way in which we want to do it. Now, I know Berta's still new to the job, and I know there's probably an element of posturing here. I understand that as the club's co-chair, you probably want to make the point that you hired this guy to do exactly this. So just make it clear to everybody that that's exactly what he's going to be doing over the summer. But he could have said, Andrea Berta and Mikel Arteta will work collaboratively on this, or, we'll work together as a team. He made the specific point of saying that Berta is going to be playing a really, really important role. Now, does that mean that Arteta doesn't play an important role? No, not necessarily. But it means that he's giving the keys to Andrea Berta here. And it's on Berta to then manage down and to make sure That he's in sort of cahoots with Mikel Arteta as far as he can possibly be. But I think it's very, very clear who's got the majority of the power now going into the summer. And I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. Focus yourself, Mikel, on certain aspects. Do what you can, do your best. Obviously, you're going to have a say in the transfers because ultimately they're players that you need to extract the most out of. To use one of his phrases, if it's a lemon, you need to squeeze as much juice out as possible. But I do feel like there's been a slight adjustment at the top. And I don't think it was an adjustment that Arsenal were willing to make when Edu was there, but they're willing to make now with Andrea Berta having come in. So I'm not saying like there's this huge crack in the leadership or upstairs. I'm not saying there's any friction or anything like that, but I do think the dynamic has changed. And I think the language that Mikel Arteta has used points to that. The language that Josh Kroenke has used points to that. And one thing I'll say about Mikel Arteta, I know a lot of people call him emotional and they say sometimes he's too emotional and he says silly things. He can do that after a game for sure. But he's also very, very clever and very, very switched on psychologically. And when he says things like that, I promise you it's deliberate. I'm certain it's deliberate. So let's see how it pans out. Let's see how we go. Let's see what Arsenal as a football club can deliver. Love to get your thoughts on this and anything else that we've discussed on today's show. Or if you've got any other comments or points that you want to discuss, get involved. You can do so in the live chat. Love to hear from you. We're going to do that for the last 10 or so minutes of the show. So, get involved in the chat. Okay, let's take some of your comments on this. Silly Billy says, be careful what you wish for. You lose Arteta, be prepared to lose some players. I think that was in response to some of the comments that were coming through at the time from people saying, well, look, if he doesn't deliver this season, he's gone. And Berta is here to kind of watch over him and make sure that he delivers. If not, see you later. It's curtains. It's good night. As far as Arteta's concerned, as Arsenal boss, I agree with you. There's a lot of players that join the club because of him and that stay at the club partly because of him. And so this idea that if you lost him, you wouldn't lose players is mad. So you're right to highlight that, I think. Jid says, Berta isn't coming in to just dictate terms. Can we stop analysing football in a vacuum here? Arteta is still the manager, not the head coach. 1 minute, fans are saying Arteta is being let down by the Kroenkes because he doesn't have influence. The next minute, it's Arteta is so powerful that he tells the sporting director what to do. That's not how things work. I think you've highlighted two completely different sort of like extremes in terms of the opinion. I don't think Berta's coming in to go, F you, Mikel. I'm taking the reins. I'm in charge. And I'm going to do what I want to do and tough shit. I don't think that's what he's doing. But I do think he is going to have the final say. And I think Mikel Arteta, using the language that he's been using, suggests that he's accepted and understood that he's going to have to pass some of the power that he maybe previously had on. Maybe Arsenal learned from what happened with Edu. I don't know. Again, this is just a theory, but maybe, they watched Edu come in, work in tandem and collaboratively really, really well with Mikel Arteta, take the club in the right direction. And then they lost a big asset in Edu because he felt perhaps that Arteta's growth was there, but his maybe wasn't. And maybe they've learned from that, and they've learned that you can't group the sporting director and the manager together anymore, that there has to be that line. And you don't want that line to be a hard line. You want that line to be blurred at times because you want them to be able to work well together without there being that those kind of office politics, if you like. So I don't think what I'm saying, I'm certainly not trying to come across that way, is that Berta comes in and says, Mikel, tough. I'm in charge now. I'm calling the shots. You work with what I give you, and that's that. But equally, I don't think it's going to be as level and as equal as it maybe was between Arteta and Edu. And as for the manager versus head coach thing, if they do feel like they need to take a bit of the responsibility away from Mikel now and pass it on to someone else, they're not going to demote the guy. Like, they're not going to go up to him and go, oh, we're changing your job title, by the way, because that looks like a backward step. the way that we operate and the dynamics might change and look slightly different. But that will be because, we've got someone with a different skill set to Edu in, someone with more experience than Edu in, and Arsenal feel that's the way to go. So I'm not suggesting there's a big problem or an issue, but I do think we're going to see a slight change in the dynamic. Andrew says, Harry, do you know how much Berta is being paid? I have not got a clue, mate. Sorry, I can't help you with that. I don't know. And also, like, sometimes I see a lot of people on social media often quoting like player salaries. And it's like, come on, man, like you've just picked that up off some dodgy website. You don't know that for a fact. You only know what's been reported. And we all know that what's reported is not always 100% accurate. Sometimes it includes bonuses and you get an overinflated figure. Sometimes it doesn't include bonuses and you get a figure that's below maybe what they're actually being paid. We just don't know. We just don't know. Ian Roy says, question. If you look at Arsenal's XG over the season, they rank 6th, but are overperforming their XG the most. As much as it looks like a striker solves the issue, do you think Arsenal create enough? I don't. And I've said this throughout the season. I think we lack creativity. And I think that's partly because we've seen Odegaard drop off quite a bit this season, but that's not the sole reason. I think we need more creativity in the midfield, and we need more creativity in the wide areas for me in terms of players being able to create their own chances as well, to be able to dribble, to beat people, to drop a shoulder, to come inside people. I think we're a very, very rigid teams at times in terms of our system, and I think that inability to break from the mold at times and empower some of our talented players to be mavericks essentially at the right times in the right places, I think that has held us back a little bit. But you're right. There's all this talk about a striker, but if you don't create more good chances, then that striker's going to find it very, very difficult, isn't they? Aren't they? Sorry. Footy Corner TV says, do you think there's a genuine power shift, or is Berta actually just doing his job where Edu wasn't doing well enough? I'm reluctant to say that Edu wasn't doing well enough because the team moved in the right direction when Edu came in. And, Edu, I know because I've interviewed him once or twice, can light up any room that he walks into. And so I don't think Edu was bad at his job. I don't want to say that because I think that's me jumping to conclusions. But I think Edu clearly was more of a people's person than maybe Andrea Berta is, and did really, really well in that aspect and on that side of things. Probably forged really good relationships, whereas Berta feels like a bit more of a kind of hardline businessman. Now, we've heard nothing from Andrea Berta. His English is still quite limited, and obviously he's working on that. But that makes it really difficult to read him as a character. So I don't want to draw too many conclusions about Andrea Berta and his character. But with Edu, I think he had a very specific skill set. It served us well at the time when we really needed to change the culture and do a lot of off-the-pitch stuff. Maybe he lacked a little bit in terms of some of the business, some of the figures, some of the numbers. Doesn't have as extensive a contact network, you'd imagine, as someone who's vastly more experienced and has been doing it at one of Europe's top clubs for a really long time. But again, I don't want to go down this route of criticizing Edu because I don't think necessarily that's fair. James says, morning, Harry. During the transfer window, can we do on this day 5 years ago or 10 years ago, please? In terms of like what, looking back at like signings and stuff we made, because we're going into pre-season, so there isn't going to be games to look back on, but we can do a few trips down memory lane for sure. I'm sure we'll be looking for stuff to talk about over the course of the window, no doubt. Just leave that in the comment section, not in the live chat as well, so I can go back to that and pick it up, and I'll jot it down in my sort of list of ideas. Okay. I like this. Cooler Dude has described what I've been describing as change in scope. He says in the business world, we call this change in scope. I think that's a much better way, much more concise way of putting it. He says it's nothing major. Yeah, maybe it's not, but it is a shift. It is a change in the dynamic, I think, and it is something that's a little bit different to what we've seen and what we've been doing previously. Brave says, what is this obsession with who has the power thing? It's none of our business. We should all be hoping they work well together. I just want to win. No, I agree. I agree on that. But if this change in scope, as it was very well put, is the difference between us winning and not winning, then it's a really important and significant thing. It's not like I don't know why people like, and I'm not saying you, my friend, but I feel like people always take things like to extremes. Like me saying that Berta will be the top dog doesn't mean that Arteta's value is gone and that he has no say in anything whatsoever. Like, two things can be true. Like, Arteta can still have a huge influence, but Andrea Berta could be the guy that calls the shots and makes the final decisions, or at least has to give those decisions the green light. Those two things can be true at once. And it's this idea, like, I'll give you an example. I don't want to dwell on this for too long, but the other day I put something out on social media where I said, the whole stadium with 3 minutes to go, 5 minutes to go, is singing, "We've got Super Mick Arteta." It's ringing around Emirates Stadium. Tells you what the match-going fans think about him. Now, because I said match-going fans, it doesn't mean that I don't respect non-match-going fans or their opinion, or that they're not allowed to have one. But it's this classic kind of world that we live in now, where it's like you say one thing, someone's so desperate to pick a hole in it that they then create a scenario and a situation and a power struggle or a debate or an argument that doesn't even exist. Me saying that the match-going fans are behind Mikel Arteta, that's fact, because they were all singing his name. I can measure that because I'm there, I'm in the stadium. That doesn't mean, I didn't say at the bottom of that post, so that means that if you don't like Mikel Arteta and you don't attend matches and you live on the other side of the world, you have no right to an opinion and your opinion doesn't matter. I didn't say that. Two things can be true at once. And that's just an example of where, like, again, people have taken this discussion and they're going to make something of it that doesn't really exist. Malarkey, thank you so much for your super chat and kind donation to the channel, mate. I really, really appreciate that. He says, can we have £10 on Kiwior staying, because there is no guarantee that a replacement will be any better? I think Kiwior's performances at the end of this season have given us a real decision to make. But my fear is that at some point, Jakub Kiwior will take a decision rather than Arsenal Football Club. If Gabriel comes back and Kiwior's nowhere to be seen again for months on end, will he not get to the point, having shown what he can do, where he wants to move on? Equally, if you don't think he's ever going to get those opportunities and his recent performances have seen his price increase or his value increase to the point where you can get a really good deal for him, you might consider it as well. I think he's given us some thinking to do, that's for sure. That is definite. There's no doubt about that. T-Evolution says, except Harry, they weren't all singing his name. Some were. So respectfully, what you said, it's not a fact. Well, the vast majority were singing his name, because that was the loudest chant and song going around the Emirates Stadium all day. So, like, what was there? A few sulking with their arms crossed, facing away from the pitch, throwing their toys out of the pram. I'm not going to sing Super Mick Arteta. Well, maybe there was a few of those, but certainly wasn't the majority. What else have we got in the live chat? I'm going to take one or two more before I sign off. Arsenal Content says, I think we should sell Kiwior. He's been solid, but still exposed a few times. His value is high now, so time will tell. So time to sell. For me, that depends on what offers come in, really. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. I'm not super big on, how do I put this without sounding bad? If we keep him, I'll be fine with that. But if we sold him at the right price, I'd also be fine with that. I don't really have an extreme opinion one way or the other on Jakub Kiwior. I think he's a good squad player, as he's proven over the last few months. But if we need to do other business, or there's someone out there that as a club we think can be better, then you do that business and you make it happen. Because, as I said right at the top of the show, and it's a nice kind of place to circle back round to and wrap up today's pod, renewal, regeneration, and moving with the times. These things are really, really important if Arsenal want to maintain a place at the top table. Now, only by being at the top table can you win the big ones. And so we need to be here. And we need to make sure that we stay here even when we're not winning trophies, so that we're in with a shout and we're in contention. But yeah. Okay. I will speak to you all a little bit later on. Thank you all so much for joining me on today's episode. I'm going to go and have some breakfast because I am absolutely starving. Don't forget to leave a like on the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. In fact, should we check in where we're at in terms of the likes right now? Because there's over 700 of you with us live right now, which is incredible to see. But there's only 173 likes on the board. Come on, can we get to 500 likes on this video? It should be easy work. Easy work. It really does help. If you're listening on audio, subscribe, leave us a review. And if you fancy joining us on Patreon, getting access to exclusive content, and of course, getting the episodes ad-free, you can do that over on Patreon. I'll see you all on the next one. Goodbye.